You're listening to News, Views, and Quests for Truth with She7Anon.
Psalm 144 of David. Praise be the Lord, my rock, who trains thy hands for war, my fingers for battle. He is my loving God and my fondness, my stronghold and my deliverer, my shield in whom I take refuge, who subdues people under me. O Lord, what is a man that you care for him? The Son of Man that you think of him? Man is like a breath, his days are like a fleeting shadow. Part your heavens, O Lord, and come down, touch the mountains so they smoke. Send forth lightning and scatter them. The enemies, shoot your arrows and rout them. Reach down your hand from on high. Deliver me and rescue me from the mighty waters, from the hands of foreigners whose mouths are full of lies, whose right hands are deceitful. I will sing a new song to you, O God. On the 10-string lyre I will make music to you. To the one who gives victory to kings, who delivers his servant David from the deadly sword. Deliver me and rescue me from the hands of foreigners, whose mouths are full of lies, whose right hands are deceitful. Then our sons in their youth will be like well-nurtured plants, and our daughters will be like pillars carried to adorn a palace. Our barns will be filled with every kind of provision. Our sheep will increase by thousands, by tens of thousands in our fields. Our oxen will draw heavy loads. There will be no breaching of walls, no going into captivity, no cry of distress in our streets. Blessed are the people for whom this is true. Blessed are the people whose God is the Lord.
Thank you for joining me. Today is March 8th, 2020. Today is a Women's International Day. This month is also, we will have St. Patrick's Day, and it is National Brain Injury Awareness Month. All of that and today's top news I will cover. Godspeed, Q. Where we go one, we go all. Love and light, patriot. Have faith and trust in yourself. Where we go one, we go all. A couple of interesting bits of information have come up today as I continue to follow the latest news on the virus. I do want to also remind you, if you haven't done this yet, it's time to set your clock if it didn't do it automatically. Last night this was trending, daylight savings time. As we move towards the next hour of spring, we lose an hour of sleep. Here, Professor Steve Hank says we are forcing Americans to switch their clocks to daylight savings time this Sunday, and he thinks it's ridiculous. He says, when we mess with time, we lose about 2.28% of our USA GDP and increase our risk for heart attacks. A universal time standard is the only remedy. Hashtag daylight savings. This is a conversation that is active. Some states, I believe Arizona, are no longer acknowledging the daylight savings time. And there's discussion in my own state of Washington of this being the last daylight savings switch. We'll see what happens as we move forward towards that, but there are plenty of articles, and this professor cites WSJ.com for more information if you want to follow that. All right, we'll be right back after this message.
Good morning, gang, and welcome to March 8th, 2020, and we shall take a look on this Sunday morning at this day in history for March 8th. What do we have? Well, we have got a lot as usual. I will tell you that there is a link down below if you want to jump in deeper on March 8th. Okay, let's see. In 1896, on this date, Volunteers of America forms in New York City, the VOA. In 1898, Richard Strauss, Don Quixote premieres in Coulin. And in 1900, the National League decides to go with 8 teams. They exclude Baltimore, Cleveland, Louisville, and Washington. Baseball, in other words, which is nearly baseball season. Okay, very cool. All right, moving on down the line. In 1913, the Internal Revenue Service begins to levy and collect income taxes. In 1915, the first U.S. Navy mine layer, the Baltimore, is commissioned. In 1916, on March 8th, U.S. invades Cuba for third time, this to end corrupt Menocal regime. I'm not sure. Menocal, one of the many rulers, or very few rulers there in Cuba. Anyway, moving on down the line. In 1917, Russian February Revolution begins in earnest with protests celebrating International Women's Day and riots in St. Petersburg. Food rations and conduct of the war. 1920, Denmark and Cuba joined the League of Nations. In 1921, Spanish Premier Eduardo Dato Irandir is assassinated while exiting the Parliament building in Madrid. Let me see, way over here. In 1927, Pan American Airlines incorporates, and in 1929, on March 8th, U.S. Worker Union Commission reports of slavery in Liberia. In 1930, Babe Ruth signs 2-year contract for $160,000 with New York Yankees. And moving further down, take a look. In 1941, first baseball player drafted into World War II, which would be Hugh Mulcahy from the Phillies. In 1942, Japanese forces capture Rangoon, Burma. In 1942, KNIL, Dutch Colonial Army on Java, Dutch Colonial Army on Java surrenders to Japanese armies. In 1943, 335 Allied bombers attacked Germany's city of Nuremberg, a center for military production. In 1943, on March 8th, limited gambling legalized in Mexico. Oh, you'll love this one, Lady RWB. In 1945, on this date, Kiss Me Kate opens in Britain. In 1945, on March 8th, 53 Amsterdammers executed by Nazi occupiers. In 1945, the International Women's Day is first observed. In 1945, also on March 8th, Phyllis M. Daly is the first black nurse sworn in as a U.S. Navy ensign. Interesting. I did not know that. See what you can get all on this day in history? Okay, let's see. In 1953, census indicates 239,000 farmers gave up farming in the last 2 years. In 1953, KSWO TV Channel 7 in Lawton, Oklahoma, an ABC affiliate begins broadcasting. In 1957, Israeli troops leave Egypt. In 1957, Egypt reopens the Suez Canal after Israel withdraws from the occupied Egyptian territory. So much going on. In 1958, William Faulkner says U.S. schools degenerated to become babysitters. In 1959, on March 8th, Groucho Chico and Harpo Marx final TV appearance together. In 1959, pro-Egyptian coup fails in Mosul, Iraq. What else do we have? In 1964, Malcolm X resigns from the Nation of Islam on March 8th. In 1966, an IRA bomb destroys Nelson's Column in Dublin. And 1967, Modini will love this. New Orleans Saints begin selling season tickets. 20,000 sold on the first day. In 1968, on March 8th, Bill Graham's New York rock venue, Fillmore East, opens in Manhattan. In 1968, in Poland, students demonstrate in Warsaw. In 1970, WTCI, you'll like this one, Chano, WTCI TV channel 45 in Chattanooga, Tennessee, a PBS station, begins broadcasting. And let's see, in 1971, Radio Hanoi broadcasts Jimi Hendrix's Star Spangled Banner. In 1971, gun battle between official Irish Republican Army and provisional IRA leave one man killed, a result of a feud between the two wings of the IRA developing since the split in 1970. In 1972, on March 8th, first airship flown over Britain in 20 years, and in 1972, the first flight of the Goodyear blimp. In 1973, the Eisenhower Tunnel, world's highest and U.S.'s longest, opened 60 kilometers west of Denver, Colorado. In 1973, Paul and Linda McCartney are fined 100 pounds for growing cannabis. All right, let's see, who else do we have? 1975, Royal Canadian Mint announces branch opening in Winnipeg, Manitoba. Okay. And in 1980, U.S. performs nuclear test site at Nevada test site. Boy, March was a busy month for blowing up nuclear stuff in the Nevada desert. In 1983, President Reagan's first known use of the term evil empire about the USSR in his speech in Florida on March 8, 1983. In 1986, 4 members of a French TV crew are abducted in Beirut, Lebanon. In 1986, Japanese probe Susi passes Halley's Comet at 109,000 kilometers. I'm not sure. Let's take a look into that. You know, I dig the space thing. And let's see, what else do we have? 1987, the FBI apprehends most wanted Claude L. Dallas Jr. in California. And for all you buffs, boomer buffs too, I should say. I don't know. In 1987, A-Team last aired on NBC TV after 4 years. All right, there you have it. There's more. There's a link below. Be sure and check it out. But that is going to do it for this Sunday and for this day in history, March 8th. Take care, gang. We'll see you again. Same Scout time, same Scout channel. Thank you very much for all the support. Take care, all of you, and God bless.
And you can catch more great programming at Last Scout Radio's channel website on YouTube, where there are great links to find out more ways to stay connected with Last Scout Radio. This Day in History is Scout's specialty daily videos you can find. Saturday night, there's radio theater. On Friday nights, there's the LZ. Thursdays, Ladies United on Thursdays. Wednesday night, Radio X Factor. Tuesday night, Radio Mysteries. And Monday, Atomic Biscuits with Back Fun. Also, if there is a rally, Last Scout Radio often has a great community connection there for that. So make sure you subscribe and hit the bell so that you get all notifications. Thanks for tuning in. We'll continue the show right after this. I'd like to introduce you to our president and his campaign to be president number 46 in 2020. The Trump Pence Keep America Great campaign has come up with a brilliant way for you to get involved. Help fight with President Trump. Become a digital activist. Your role as a digital activist, you'll help promote President Trump's accomplishments with your digital networks. There are several ways: through Instagram, through the news, through Facebook, and this one here, using hashtags. I've often said this is a very important way to do this. And using this first step is to find and engage fellow supporters, and you can use and search for this hashtag, Army for Trump. Let's watch the video.
Want to stay up to date on what Team Trump, the president, and the Army for Trump are saying? Hashtags are a great way to make sure you see what we and all your fellow supporters are saying online. It is also the best way to make sure the president and all of Team Trump is seeing what you say. So make sure you are searching these hashtags. Want to stay up to date on what Team Trump, the president, and the Army for Trump are saying? Hashtags are a great way to make sure you see what we and all your fellow supporters are saying online. It is also the best way to make sure the president and all of Team Trump is seeing what you say. So make sure you are searching these hashtags and using them in your own post. For all campaign-related content, you can use hashtag MAGA, hashtag Keep America Great, and hashtag Trump 2020. To find and engage with fellow supporters, you can use and search hashtag Army for Trump. If you are out in the field, knocking on doors, talking to neighbors, and registering voters for President Trump's re-election, you can use hashtag Lead Right to share what you are up to in the field and see how we are expanding our ground game. Are you planning on going to the next rally? Don't forget to search hashtag Trump Rally for the latest updates on the president's major events across the country and use it to share rally content with your followers. Last but not least, when you talk about the 2020 election, let's make sure people know it is going to be a hashtag Trump 2020 landslide. As always, thank you for your support. And don't forget to recruit your friends to join the Army for Trump movement.
There you have it. That is one of the ways that you can help become part of the Army for Trump. there is this you can download, and it teaches you how to become a social activist. All right, so if you are supporting President Trump, consider how you can join the Army for Trump. And that's at www.armyfortrump.com. Become a digital activist. If you search for that, you'll find this website. And more news coming up in just one more moment. Thanks. And now to DOJ. I have put together this slide here for you. So if you would like to do some research into Q, number 1458 says, hint, those responsible for spying FBEY are present. Panic Q. And now we're going to go to the presser with Attorney General Barr.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. I'm pleased that I'm joined here today by Secretary Chad Wolf of the Department of Homeland Security, and my distinguished colleagues from the Five Eyes, Australia, Canada, New Zealand, and the United Kingdom, and representatives of some of the leading tech companies who are joining us in this very important announcement of the voluntary principles to counter online child sexual exploitation and abuse. Last summer, I traveled to London to participate in our Five Eyes conference there, and to hold a 5-country ministerial digital industry roundtable. There, our 5 nations met with senior representatives of Facebook, Google, Microsoft, Roblox, Snap, and Twitter. We agreed that a more robust global response toward online child sexual abuse was necessary to protect children around the world and to make sure that there was no safe space on the internet for offenders to operate. Further, we committed to developing a set of voluntary principles to ensure online platforms and services have the systems they need to combat online sexual exploitation of children. As a result of that meeting and a lot of diligent work since then, today we are collectively launching the 11 voluntary principles. And I'm happy that the hard work by both the Five Eyes and our industry colleagues have come to fruition today. The 11 voluntary principles establish a baseline framework for companies that provide online services to deter the use of the internet as a tool for sexually exploiting and abusing children. The 6 technology companies involved in this initiative have now publicly endorsed the principles, and I commend them for their leadership. We're very grateful for the role they have played. And actually, when this meeting was announced, we've heard from some additional companies that they would like to participate. The sexual exploitation and abuse of children is one of the most horrendous crimes affecting the most vulnerable members of our society. Unfortunately, this has emerged as a massive problem, not only in the real world, but in the virtual world. Last year alone, more than 16.8 million cyber tips of suspected child sexual abuse material offenses were made to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, NCMEC, involving children as young as infants. Earlier today at the White House, we heard from the members of the Phoenix 11, which is the group responsible for the video that you just watched. Phoenix 11 is an organization of survivors whose child sexual abuse was recorded and in a majority of cases distributed online. I commend these brave survivors for raising the profile of this issue. Our nation owes them a debt of gratitude for their courage in coming forward. They have given voice to victims that have been silenced, and they inspire us to take action. No child should ever have to endure the unspeakable pain and suffering of sexual exploitation and abuse. Sadly, however, technological change over the past few decades have amplified the scope and harm caused by these crimes. First, the borderless nature of the internet has made these crimes transnational. A global problem requires a global solution. We are therefore collaborating with our international counterparts, particularly our close rule of law allies like those represented in this room. Second, technology has made it easier to produce, conceal, and distribute child sexual abuse materials. For example, over the last decade, the Department of Justice has seen a 160% increase in cases involving the production of videos and images of children who are sexually exploited and abused. This increase is due in part to the ready accessibility of smartphones, which can be used to both produce images and videos and distribute them. Third, with digital content, sexual abuse imagery can be preserved online for much longer periods of time and disseminated more broadly. Victims incur not only the initial harm of abuse, but are victimized again and again when those images are recirculated. For example, sexual abuse imagery of one particular victim has been found in almost 21,500 U.S. investigations over the last 20 years. And as we heard from the courageous victims this morning, the Phoenix 11, when we met with them, knowing that their child sexual abuse materials are still online being distributed is debilitating and preventing many of them from being able to use the internet. Victims should not be forced to live in such fear.
All right, those are some powerful words from our Attorney General Barr, and I think it's important that we continue to follow this story. I had an article to follow up with this, which is interesting. There is the remarks made at the initial on March 5th. I believe they're the same as what he's just said here today. You can find that at DOJ, where he discusses the launch of voluntary principles to counter online child sexual exploitation and abuse. As well as, I found this article a couple of days ago, and it is dated the same day as that presser was given, that Facebook, Google, and others adopt guidelines intended to fight child abuse. Today, the Department of Justice and Homeland Security, along with government counterparts in Australia, Canada, New Zealand, and the United Kingdom, published guidelines to help the tech industry fight online child exploitation. The principles were developed in consultation with Facebook, Google, Microsoft, Roblox, Snap, and Twitter, after all 6 companies agreed to tackling the online child sexual abuse epidemic. The document, Voluntary Principles to Counter Online Child Sexual Exploitation and Abuse, include 11 principles. It covers themes like targeting online grooming, preventing searches of child sexual abuse material, and responding to evolving threats. According to a statement published by the DOJ, the principles are intended to have sufficient flexibility to ensure effective implementation. And a quote from U.S. Attorney General Barr, "We hope the voluntary principles will spur collective action on the part of industry to stop one of the most horrendous crimes impacting some of the most vulnerable members of society," which we just heard him say. Many tech companies already have at least some measures to combat child exploitation. Recently, Facebook made its algorithms for flagging harmful photos and videos open source and available on GitHub. Microsoft has shared its tool for receiving or reviewing chat-based conversations and detecting online grooming. Still, online child exploitation is a widespread and devastating problem. And I do want to point you towards Ivanka Trump, who has also taken up this very important topic. I have a video that is on my channel as well, and I'll share some of that with you. It's very helpful, I think, to hear from the victims. I think it's very important, and I'm glad they understand this. All right, stand by as I gain control. Thanks. And it has been a little while since I got to catch up with you, so I wanted to just rewind a little bit to March 3rd of this year, 2020. This blog from Nicholas Mosvig. On this day, the Supreme Court speaks on the First Amendment. We're going to rewind and look at the historical documentation from the Supreme Court that helps shape our First Amendment today. On March 3rd, 1919, the Supreme Court decided Schenck versus United States, the first in a line of major First Amendment cases to clarify the meaning of free speech. In the case, the defendants were charged with the mailing of printed circulars to obstruct the recruiting and enlistment service, in violation of the Espionage Act 1917, which made it illegal to convey information with the intent to interfere with the operation of the U.S. Armed Forces and to obstruct recruitment. Charles T. Schenck was the General Secretary of the Socialist Party of Philadelphia. He was in charge of the Socialist headquarters from which the documents were sent, and witnessed the printing of leaflets asking drafted men to evade service in World War I. The other defendant, Elizabeth Baer, was a member of the Socialist Party's executive board who had recorded the minutes of the party's meetings. The circulars made a series of constitutional arguments as to why the draft was unconstitutional and tyrannical. They pointed to the 13th Amendment, Section 1, to say that a conscript, or a person drafted into military service, was little better than a convict. They also believed that it was unconstitutional under Article 1, Section 8's power to raise armies and to call out the militia, to send citizens away to foreign shores to shoot up the people of other lands. Finally, they argued that conscription was despotism in its worst form, and thus citizens should assert their First Amendment rights to rally against the government's policy. Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes, writing for the unanimous court, ruled against Schenck and Baer, finding that their convictions under the Espionage Act did not conflict with the First Amendment. In his opinions, Holmes asserted the principle which became known as the clear and present danger test. He asked, were the words used in such circumstances and are of such a nature to create a clear and present danger that they will bring about the substantive evils that Congress has the right to prevent? It was, as Holmes wrote, a question of proximity and degree. The most stringent protection of free speech would not protect a man in falsely shouting fire in a theater and causing panic, he said in a famous passage. The court admitted that normally the content of the Socialist Party leaflets would be protected by the First Amendment. However, Holmes thought that the circumstances of World War I and the mass recruitment required for the United States to enter the war necessarily affected free speech rights, as actions that were acceptable in times of peace would now hinder the war effort, and thus they could not be protected so long as American men were at war. Just 8 months later, in Abrams versus United States, Holmes appeared to change his mind about that very concept. In a case involving the Sedition Act of 1918, an amendment to the Espionage Act of 1917, the majority of the court upheld the act as constitutional under the clear and present danger test. The defendants printed and threw from a New York City building 2 leaflets signed Revolutionists, which denounced the sending of American troops to Russia and the American efforts to impede the Russian Revolution, and advocated the cessation of the production of weapons to be used against Soviet Russia, along with a general workers' strike. Holmes, joined by Justice Louis Brandeis, dissented. He distinguished this case from Schenck because here he did not find the existence of intent to interfere with the American war effort, but only to support the Russian Revolution and stop American intervention there. Thus, there was no forcible act of opposition to some proceeding of the United States in pursuance of the war. Holmes then famously stated his theory of the marketplace of ideas, whereby the First Amendment and Constitution are animated by the belief that the ultimate good desired is better reached by free trade in ideas, that the best test of truth is the power of the thought to get itself accepted in the competition of the market, and that truth is the only ground upon which their wishes safely can be carried out. By the next spring, Holmes joined Brandeis in dissenting from another decision upholding convictions under the Espionage Act and argued for an understanding of clear and present danger, which would not treat disagreement in thought and belief as disloyalty. In 1969, the clear and present danger test was overruled in the landmark Brandenburg versus Ohio decision, which determined under the imminent lawless action standard that mere advocacy was per se protected under the First Amendment. While Holmes' language regarding shouting fire in a crowded has often been misappropriated beyond prohibiting falsely shouting fire in a theater, his broader philosophy animating the First Amendment remains with us today. This was written by Nicholas Mosvik. He is a senior fellow for constitutional content at the National Constitution Center. Now I have a quiz for you. I hope you're ready to play. We're going to test your knowledge of the First Amendment. And just a moment, I'll be right back. All right, welcome back. This is our quiz. How well do you know the First Amendment? First Amendment guarantees Americans certain freedoms. Do you know which ones? First question, how many freedoms are named in the First Amendment? 1, 5, 3, or 10? If you selected 5, you're correct. There are 5 freedoms in the First Amendment. Freedoms of religion, freedom of speech, freedom of press, freedom of assembly, and freedom of petition. What freedoms are not in the First Amendment? Right to bear arms, right to free enterprise, right to a speedy and public trial. All of the above or none of the above. If you said all of the above, you're correct. The right to bear arms is a Second Amendment. There's no right to free enterprise mentioned in the U.S. Constitution or the amendments to it. The Sixth Amendment requires a speedy and public trial on criminal charges. The First Amendment does include our rights to free speech and religious liberty. Question 3. When did the Supreme Court first decide that the Internet is protected by the First Amendment? 2004, 1997, we'll review this term, or never. If you said 1997, you're correct. The Supreme Court found that the First Amendment protects Internet content in a Reno versus ACLU case, which it struck down portions of the Communications Decency Act. I think Barr might have made some progress in that end, but this is the way it stands with the Supreme Court. Next question. Question 4. Which of these has no First Amendment protection? Porn, poetry, obscenity, comic books. Surprisingly, it's obscenity. Obscenity conveys no ideas and is of no value to society. Porn can be protected as sexual expression for adults. I think it's time we reviewed that. Question 5. A protest march is made possible by which First Amendment freedom? Right of assembly, freedom of the press, freedom of religion, freedom of speech. If you said right of assembly, you're correct. The right of assembly was particularly valuable to show public support and sentiment before the days of online communication and social networks. Question 6. The First Amendment protects us against the federal government, all U.S. governmental bodies, public criticism, or crude jokes. If you said all U.S. governmental bodies, you're correct. Initially, the court said the First Amendment applied only to the federal government, but under the 14th Amendment, adopted in 1868, and later court decisions, the 5 freedoms of the First Amendment, along with the rest of the Bill of Rights, have been held to apply to state and local governments as well. Question 7. The father of the First Amendment is George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, or Oliver Wendell Holmes. If you said James Madison, you're correct. James Madison is considered the father of the First Amendment because he was its principal author, along with the rest of the first 10 amendments to the Constitution, called the Bill of Rights. Madison later became the 4th President of the United States. Supreme Court Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes sometimes is called the father of the modern First Amendment because his Supreme Court opinions and writings have shaped much of contemporary First Amendment law. Next question. When was the First Amendment adopted? 1776, 1789, 1791, or 1865? It wasn't until 1791. The First Amendment and the other 9 amendments that make up the Bill of Rights were adopted in 1791 when ratified by a majority of the states. The amendments were adopted 2 years after the Constitution was ratified with a promise to the American people that a Bill of Rights would be added. Question 9. Can students successfully challenge a public school's dress codes or requirement that students wear uniforms by claiming it violates their First Amendment right to free expression? Yes, it depends, or no. It actually depends. Courts often have sided with school officials who adopt dress codes or require uniforms and cite educational benefits such as a better learning environment or student safety. Students sometimes have successfully challenged such rules when the clothing carries a political slogan or a message. But when the challenge simply is that students should be able to wear what they want, school officials generally win. Question 10. Which of these does not have First Amendment protection? Professional sports, ballet, hip-hop music, or movies? If you said professional sports, you're correct. Sports do not convey ideas and are not protected by free speech clause. Movies, music, and expressive dance have First Amendment protection, just like books and magazines. Question 11. In the 1969 case involving free speech by public school students, Tinker versus Des Moines Independent Community School District, what symbol was worn by the students was at the heart of the dispute? Was it the American flag, iron crosses, black peace armbands, or rosary beads? If you said black peace armbands, you're correct. Tinker, the Supreme Court said the First Amendment rights of 3 Iowa students were violated when they were suspended for wearing black armbands to school to protest deaths in the Vietnam War. Even though the students were not speaking words, the High Court said armbands were a form of symbolic speech. The armband, worn by one of 3 students, Mary Beth Tinker, is on display in the Cox First Amendment Gallery at the museum. Question 12. True or false? School-sponsored prayer is prohibited in public schools. That means students can pray in school at all. They can't pray in school at all, in any way. True or false? It is false. The Supreme Court has said school-sponsored prayer is not legal because the First Amendment forbids the government from endorsing any particular religious faith. But students are free to pray themselves or in groups as long as teachers, coaches, or other school officials are not involved. Question 13. Which of these is not protected by the First Amendment? A text message criticizing a public official, a protest march against illegal immigration, a threat against someone, a cartoon that makes fun of a religion. It's correct if you said a threat against someone. We are free to criticize public officials, public policies, and to say what we believe, but the First Amendment's protection for free speech does not apply to criminal conduct, which includes things like true threats, treason, obscenity, and child porn. Your First Amendment freedom of assembly means you can protest with limits concerning when, where, and how, but not on the message of your protest? Or is it whenever, wherever, and however you want without restriction? Or is it only on your own property? Or is it on someone else's private property, as long as an issue of major public interest is involved? If you said with limits, you're correct. Government can set general rules about when, where, and how we can protest in public if those rules directly link to concerns about public safety or protecting individual rights. Question 15, true or false? It's against the law to burn an American flag to protest government policies. Unfortunately, it's false. The U.S. Supreme Court in 1989 ruled 5-4 the desecration of the flag constitutes free speech, protected by the First Amendment. In 1990, Congress passed a law protecting the flag, but the Supreme Court that year, in another 5-4 ruling, struck that law down as unconstitutional. Number 16, the U.S. Constitution provides that the United States is a Christian nation, Protestant nation, nation of churchgoers, or none of the above. You said none of the above. You're correct. The only mention of religion in the United States Constitution comes in Article 6, where it rules out any religious test in order to run for public office. The First Amendment's religion clause, the amendment's first 16 words, forbids the government from establishing or supporting any particular religious faith and guarantees all citizens the right to freely exercise individual religious beliefs. Question 17. Public school officials can censor student newspapers and websites. Always, sometimes, or never. You said sometimes. You're correct. In 1988, a case at the U.S. Supreme Court said public school officials can censor school-sponsored student expression as long as they have a valid educational reason. This decision has given school officials broad authority to regulate school-sponsored publications, but school officials cannot censor student publications at whim or for reasons that are not related to education purposes. Question 18. Which of these activities are protected by the Free Press Clause? Twitter, comments on Facebook, blogging about the news, or all of the above? Correct if you said all of the above. Although the application of existing laws to blogging and other forms of free expression is still a developing area, courts have tended to apply the same First Amendment principles to blogs and statements made on websites as have been applied to older forms of communication. Question 19, which First Amendment right makes lobbying Congress possible? Right to assemble, freedom of religion, right to petition, or freedom of press? If you said right to petition, you're correct. The right to petition government for the redress of grievances is the foundation of modern lobbying. Finally, question 20. What famous American said free speech rocks after a defamation lawsuit against her was dismissed? Lady Gaga, Nancy Pelosi, Oprah Winfrey, Courtney Love, whatever, it's Oprah. And she said free speech not only lives, it rocks. In February 1998, after jurors in Amarillo, Texas rejected a defamation lawsuit brought by Texas cattlemen. The lawsuit involved a 1996 Winfrey television program about mad cow disease. Cattlemen had claimed that Winfrey harmed their industry by saying health concerns about the disease caused her to stop eating hamburgers. All right, that's 20 for 20. We did really great with this quiz, and thanks so much for playing along. Please stand by as we have another word from our wonderful support crew. Thanks.
What's your first name?
Lee. Lee, yep.
Lee, did you vote in 2016?
I did. Yes. I voted for Donald Trump.
Is this your first rally?
This is my first rally, yes.
Welcome to Charlotte.
I live in Charlotte, actually, yeah. First time I voted for Donald Trump in 2016, I was in Columbia, South Carolina. Yep.
Well, you just made an interesting point. I see you're a younger person here. You voted for Donald Trump. That is really not the norm. A lot of the younger people that we're talking to are really very much in favor of voting for Bernie Sanders. So what do you think will happen to our country if Bernie Sanders gets elected?
Well, I'm not going to lie. In 2016, I actually was a Bernie bro for a little while. But the more I heard him talk and the more I started thinking about how we were going to pay for these things, I actually went talked to my father about it, about how we were going to pay for these things, and that's what put me on to Trump. I hated the establishment. I didn't want a Bush. I didn't want a Bush dynasty. I didn't want a Clinton dynasty, because I was, much like most young Americans, anti dynasties in our country. That's not what America is about. It's about the people that have the best ideas, the best ways to move the country forward, not about just families just inheriting the government because they were in government before. So I was a Bernie bro because he was anti-establishment, but his views didn't really coincide with my views necessarily. He was just I thought myself as a liberal at the time. I'm libertarian on most things, but he didn't really coincide with my views with the socialism. We're not going to pay for all that. That's ridiculous. So that's how Donald Trump came out. And then after these last 4 years, I've just been more cemented into the Trump campaign because I've seen what he's done. I've seen what he's been doing. And I'm behind it all the way. I think he's a great president.
Are you talking to some of your friends that are Democrat or they really don't like Trump? And do you find that there's any room for dialoguing with them?
I have a ton of friends and a ton of coworkers that are so anti-Trump. I mean, you can't even say the name Trump without getting so much pushback. It's really hard to create a dialogue these days with anybody. I try to just kind of ease things in. I'll say, something about, the paycheck looked really nice this week, right? This was after the tax cuts. But yeah, it got a little bit better, didn't it? Just ease people into stuff like, we're pulling out of that war. We're not doing this. We're not doing that. Just little things. I'm not going to go overtly and saying my views on how I feel things, but there's ways that you can create a dialogue where they start talking to you, where you can say, well, that was because of Donald Trump that's happening.
Okay, well, that brings up a great point. I wanted to ask you, what would you say to people that are really on the fence right now? They don't know quite what to think about Donald Trump, and they're really not sure who to vote for. And there's a lot of people out there that have friends that are like this. So what would you say to these people that are really on the fence and friends that need to have something to open up a dialogue with people that are on the fence for who to vote for?
People that are on the fence, I would say immediately get off of social media. You're not going to know who to vote for by a 140 character tweet. I would go listen to a Trump speech, listen to a Bernie speech or this speech. Like, get the information yourself. Too much of our generation is looking towards tweet, social media. It's such a like a ADHD type of society that these young people have, where it's a tweet, it's a Twitter, it's a quick response, it's a 15-second video. Like, listen to the whole thing, form your own opinions. If you're going to go to CNN, go to Fox, find something in the middle. And, that's probably where the truth is. We have so much bias in the media. As far as creating a dialogue, just be open. I hope that people in this political climate, I know everything's heated and everybody wants to be angry, but, we're a nation. We're one nation under God. Let's all come together and, we can figure this out together.
And welcome back. We are now continuing our dive into the First Amendment, and I'll be bringing you a few more other pieces of news that are coming up. But after this, focus on when the First Amendment protects and it doesn't. This was posted on the 6th of February last month by Gene Polzinski. When it comes to free expression and the First Amendment, it's important for us to know when it protects and what we say and write, and when it doesn't. Case in point, proposed Arizona House Bill HB 2124 related to access to online content. The sponsor state representative Bob Thorpe proposes to allow users or the state attorney general to sue an internet site that edits, deletes, or makes it difficult or impossible for online users to locate and access content on the site in an easy or timely manner for political biased reasons. The bill is in line with complaints now fashionably among political conservatives nationwide that online platforms and social media sites, from Google to Facebook to Twitter and others, somehow exclude or downplay their views while emphasizing liberal viewpoints. Nothing wrong with raising such concerns. The inner policies and algorithms of these web behemoths largely generally remain hidden, and the entire online world is simply too new and ever-changing to provide an accurate portrait from the outside. So in effect, we don't know what we're not seeing when we search or use such sites, and those companies are free to set their own practices and rules on what we do see or post. Whether for altruistic or political motives, proposals such as the Arizona legislation would change that, except that the First Amendment rules out such government intervention in a private business. The First Amendment guarantees against content or viewpoint discrimination, and by extension, access to information. Apply to government, not private individuals or companies, which have their own First Amendment rights to decide what they will or won't say and post. And even legislation cannot empower individuals or attorneys general to override that constitutional protection by using civil penalties rather than the criminal law. See the old legal adage, you cannot do by the back door what you cannot do by the front door. Moreover, do we really want to override the First Amendment with such open access laws? Turn to another adage, the law of unintended consequences. Requiring internet providers to permit unrestrained access and right to post material denies such companies the ability to respond to their consumers' demands on materials that can range from offensive to repulsive. Thorpe's bill excludes libelous or pornographic material, but what about currently banned content on most social media sites, such as videos that show public assaults or are intended to bully or harass? Would internet companies and social media sites be mandated to carry deliberate misinformation about health issues? There is a small window in the wall of First Amendment protection that could possibly permit regulation of private online companies, called the public function exception. In effect, it turns a private citizen into a government operation when performing an essential government function. The exception rests on a 1946 Supreme Court decision in March versus Alabama involving a so-called company town. The court reasoned that since the town functioned as a government entity, not a private enterprise, it had become one. But the court has refined its ruling through the years, and in 1974 held that such a conversion takes place only when the private concern is providing services exclusively done by government. Clearly, providing an online platform or a social media site fails to meet that test. Some critics of the current social media policies argue that these sites are effectively a digital public square by virtue of their ubiquitous presence in modern life. Some reports say that more than 7 in every 10 Americans used social media sites in 2018, and that the number increases each year. But the very nature of the web, in which startups and competing sites of all kinds arise constantly, would also seem to prevent isolating even dominant companies for such a quasi-government role with the required exclusive provider condition. As shown in other examples where First Amendment protections come into conflict with practices or actions that offend or seem to run counter to the marketplace of ideas concept of the widest exchange of ideals or viewpoints, the court of public opinion often functions more effectively and more quickly than legal action or legislation. Public discussions and resulting social pressures to combat online bullying or videos showing assault or even murders have demonstrably changed those private provider policies on what is posted and permitted, for example. A shortcut through First Amendment protections may seem an expedient method at the time, but for very good reasons, free expression advocates should resist quicker solutions for some, in the name of protecting those long-term freedoms for us all. This was written by Gene Polinsky, and he is President and Chief Operating Officer of the Freedom Forum Institute. His contact is there, gpolinsky@freedomforum.org, or you can follow him at GeneFAC. All right, looking at CDC is probably now a normal thing for many of you. I did notice this. March 2020 is Brain Injury Awareness Month. And there is a citation, I won't get too far into it, but Brain Injury Awareness Month, recognized each March, provides an important opportunity to bring attention to the prevention of traumatic brain injury and to promote strategies to improve the quality of life for persons living with TBI and their families. TBIs caused by an impact or force to the head or body or a penetrating injury to the head affect millions of United States persons each year. Falls are leading mechanism of TBI, and older adults are at increased risk for sustaining a TBI and experiencing TBI-associated adverse outcomes. A report in this issue of MMWR found a nationwide 17% increase in the rate of fall-related TBI deaths during 2018 to 2017, which increases in most states. The largest increases in fall-related TBI deaths occurred among persons aged over 75 years. Evidence-based prevention efforts to decrease falls are important to reducing the incidence and prevalence of TBI among older adults. And of course, CDC has a response they call Stopping Elderly Accidents, Deaths, and Injuries. That initiative includes resources and tools for healthcare providers to improve identification of patients at risk for falling, as well as effective strategies to reduce the risk for fall-related injuries, including TBI. I thought it was worth bringing up. It's important for us to be aware and find out what the awareness is. Of course, there's a lot more awareness going on this month. And it is International Women's Day. I did pull up womenforwomen.org here so you can see some international women. Here is an article, Promoting Women's Rights is Fighting for Justice, from January 17th, 2020. Quality of rights under the law shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of sex. Article 1, Equal Rights Amendment. Earlier this week, Virginia became the 38th state to ratify the Equal Rights Amendment, providing the necessary majority for the ERA to move forward in becoming part of the U.S. Constitution. Now, this is from January this year. Also, I will add here and pause that I know, I saw some news that RBG also was kind of pulling back the reins on this. So that's something if you want to do a deeper dive into what's happening with the Equal Rights Amendment. However, we'll keep on this trajectory of this article. Knowing you have rights is universally transformative. Social empowerment trainers across all of our country programs begin sharing the importance of rights from the moment women start the program, and especially when trainers begin to see changes in the women themselves. Our curriculum dives deeper with a section on gender equality, rights, and decision-making. You see what's happening here? I'm pausing from the article. This is an international group. It goes out into other countries and teaches women about their rights. And this article gets, it's mostly promoting what they're doing here. Here, though, they cite the universal human rights. And I want to just add here that the universal human rights are being taught to our students at a very younger age. And so they are to study and understand the UHR by the time that they are in 6th grade. And the Constitution comes much later in their education. I think that that is a reverse action, although it is important to see what the UN General Assembly of 1948 wants us to know. And I have to say universal human rights is going all around the world. And so if you think about it, in the United States, we've got the Constitution to uphold our rights, but what do other countries have? Here is a starting place for other countries to develop their own constitutions if they have not yet. The universal human rights is quite broad, and we go back to the article. Universal Declaration of Human Rights affirms inherent dignity and of the equal and inalienable rights of all members of the human family. Classes they hold stress that human rights are those rights which all human beings are born with, no matter what their race, sex, age, or religion, nationality, marital status, or personal beliefs are. Human rights allow us to live in dignity and be respected. All human beings have natural rights they are born with, and that cannot be taken away by anyone. When a person's rights are violated, this is an act of injustice. When people demand their rights, they are fighting for justice and for what they deserve. Promoting women's rights is fighting for justice, not asking for a favor. A government can protect natural rights of human beings by creating laws, but governments do not grant people human rights. We do. National laws. The governments of many countries where we work have laws that guarantee some women's rights. So this is their report about some examples. In Nigeria, there are many cases where women can inherit land, which is crucial to having economic opportunities, but many people don't know and violate that right. Interesting. Here is a proud mother in Nigeria. The Democratic Republic of Congo is another area this group works in. They say having a marriage certificate is crucial for many women to protect their own rights to inheritance, property, and child custody, as well as their rights of their children, including access to health care or education. In countries where polygamy is not allowed, it can also prevent a man from having multiple wives. And there are some wonderful people at a community forum. In Afghanistan, Afghanistan promises many rights to women, including the right to employment and even to run for office. Yet we know that the reality for women is precarious. Often women are not allowed to leave their homes, seek an education, and continue to live in fear of domestic violence to societal norms and gender inequality. So you see, these are the things that they are finding. So this group is working to protect and advance justice for women in some of those areas. And I'll leave the rest of the article for you to find out at womenforwomen.org under their blogs. This one is promoting women's rights, fighting justice. And they did have an action splashing at the top of the page that if you wish to send a letter of support to women around the world, you could. You could send a message today, or you could use the hashtag message to my sister. So if you want to look into that, that is an ability you can do today. Send a few words of encouragement and express solidarity. And that's the piece on International Women's Day that I have for you. Now to this PSA everybody's getting plenty of. If you are sick or you suspect you're infected with this virus, follow these steps to prevent the disease from spreading to people in your home and community. Stay home except to get medical care, although some people who may have internet, like you listening now, may be able to actually get a virtual appointment, which is the way it's happening. And I'm here in Washington State, so we got a lot going on here. Also, separate yourself from other people and animals in your home. Call ahead before visiting your doctor. Wear a face mask if you're sick. Cover your coughs and sneezes. Clean your hands often. Sing happy birthday twice. Use hand sanitizer, soap and water, and avoid touching. Oh, and that's a problem for everybody. Avoid sharing personal household items. Clean all high-touch surfaces every day. Monitor your symptoms. Call 911 if you have a medical emergency. All right, this just came out. My governor is meeting with Face the Nation, and I thought their approach to this update was pretty good. This just came out today, March 8th, 2020.
Good morning. Welcome to Face the Nation. We begin again this morning with the latest on the coronavirus, as the situation both here and around the world has gotten even more serious. There are now 460 U.S. cases of COVID-19, commonly referred to as the coronavirus, in 33 states and here in the District of Columbia. 19 people have died, 16 of them in the state of Washington. The governor of Washington, Jay Inslee, joins us this morning from Seattle. Good morning to you, Governor.
Good morning. Good morning.
You've got more than 100 cases in your state. Starbucks reported one of them in downtown Seattle just a few days ago. 4 nursing homes now affected. Why haven't you been able to contain the virus?
Well, look, this is a challenging thing that the whole world is now recognizing. And what we're doing here is the things I think our state should be doing. We're mourning our losses, which have been significant. We are acting based on science and a commitment for all of us to be soldiers in this battle. And we are doing that. We're having citizens who are doing what they need to do, which is we're doing teleworking so that we can reduce people being exposed. People are staying home from work when they are ill. And all systems of government, I think, are working as diligently as possible to be very aggressive against this potentially fatal disease. So those are the things that are going on, but we should not minimize the task before us, giving the transmission. Every single social contact between humans anywhere in the world today is a potential exposure. So we now are making scientific decisions about making sure we get as much testing as possible, making sure we restock our medical supply chain, and making sure that we make good decisions about minimizing those social contacts, which we're doing in the state of Washington.
This is
All right, and so there's a lot more to that video, and you can find that on YouTube. I'm going to pause here for a moment. I'll be right back. Thanks for standing by. Finally, I just want to bring your attention to the fact that in Canada, they first recognized it around the same time we did, January 25th, 2020. Lots of headlines are floating around. I know the border agents here in Washington State and as across the northern borders as well as southern borders are keeping their eyes wide open. And if you see something, say something. This one surprised me from the New York Times, though. It says, why Washington State? How did it start? Questions answered on the U.S. coronavirus outbreak. It's really, it doesn't get into much depth, actually. And you can't really expect that from the New York Times, of course. But, you know, they make a splashy headline, and it's clickbait. And so there we go. And then others are really on the edge of wonder and concern. And these are things to consider as well. Just remember, where we go one, we go all. Thanks for joining me. I'm She7Anon, and you've been listening to News, Views, and Quest for Truth. I will join you again soon. God bless. You're listening to News, Views, and Quest for Truth with She7Anon.